Christ is risen. In a recent homily, I spoke about two women who belonged to parishes that I used to serve at, who have both since died. I spoke of them as women who had great joy, a joy that came from knowing God's love for them and His presence and action in their lives, and a joy that caused them to be missionary disciples, spreading the good news of Jesus' love. When I was vocation director, I had met a man who lived his life in such a way as he really saw everything in his life in terms of his relationship with God and how God was present and acting in his life, and about his desire to serve the Lord in whatever way the Lord was calling him to do so. Recently, I was speaking with a man from our parish who was suffering some very significant health problems. But despite the challenges to his body, his love for the Lord and his faith are marvelous. And his awareness of God's love for him causes him to continue to be a missionary disciple. All of our readings this weekend speak to us of responding to God's love for us by living according to His will, living heartfelt missionary discipleship. If you listen to the readings from the Acts of the Apostles in the next couple of weeks, you'll hear much about the Holy Spirit. In fact, the Acts of the Apostles is often called the Gospel of the Holy Spirit. In this Sunday's reading, we hear much about the early church and how they longed for the Holy Spirit, because the church later realized how much the Holy Spirit had done and continued to do in the church. That first reading tells us the most important thing the Holy Spirit did in the church and what the church's response was to that. We continue hearing from St. Peter's first letter in our second reading during this Easter season. The great Prince of the Apostles tells us that the Holy Spirit brought life to the church. Now, I know that sounds kind of nice, but what does that mean? What does that look like? St. Peter tells us that the gift of the Holy Spirit moves us to act and speak as true disciples. And he tells us how true disciples act. The 14th, 15th, and 16th chapters of the Gospel according to St. John are a beautiful expression of Jesus' awareness of his mission in the world. If you haven't read it, drop everything, run right out, and go get a copy of it. In this Sunday's particular passage, Jesus tells us plainly what the Spirit of God empowers us to do in living as true disciples. The first line of the Gospel sums it up in totality what disciples do. There is nothing more important. And in case you missed it the first time, Jesus is going to repeat it. He offers a promise that if we do what disciples do, there will be a great reward. Once again, this month of May, we look to Mary. As we will hear, she who knew the Holy Spirit at the conception of her Son would come to receive the Holy Spirit again with the disciples at Pentecost. What did she always do? Live as a true disciple of God. As we continue this season of joy and hope, remembering the Blessed Virgin Mary this May we be open to the Holy Spirit, who moves us to be missionary disciples, to proclaim and live that good news that Christ is risen.